Any questions, feel free to ask in the chat box. We'll be happy to answer all of them at the end. A little bit about myself. I am the Community Engagement Specialist here at Deaf Access Services and ASL Coordinator. I've been here for, actually, today marks my 4-year anniversary. So it's actually, I started the day, a couple days after Memorial Day. So today is today. So I'm happy to be here, happy to have this presentation happening. I have 27 deaf members in my family. My wife is deaf. My parents are deaf, my brother is deaf, and so forth. So I have a large deaf family background, and majority of us have been born deaf. Now, today we're going to talk a little bit about the differences of people with hearing losses, deaf, hard of hearing, and people with hearing loss as they get older as well. And also for you to know what kind of resources are out there for you to take good advantage of and utilize for your own benefit and to have the accommodation, the accessibility you need to get through your day-to-day life. A little bit about Deaf Access Services. We were founded in 1983, known as really just slightly before Deaf Adult Services, we were known as Western New York Service for the Hearing Impaired. We don't utilize the term hearing impaired anymore because the deaf and hard of hearing community view it as a term that's broken, impaired. So we encourage people to use deaf, hard of hearing, or people with hearing losses. So eventually would change to Deaf Adult Services, and thereafter in 2014, people asked, do you only serve adult? Not necessarily per se. We serve all ages from infants to 103 plus. So if anyone's over there 103 years old, we still can help and serve you. And congratulations on making that milestone. With all that, the real goal of it was to really help the community be able to have access to communication outside services in the city, community, and counties. We are the actual only nonprofit organization agency in Western New York providing deaf and hard of hearing community members for this specific service. All of our services really include like VRI, which is video remote interpreting, card services, communication at real time, translation, employment, advocacy, community navigation, ASL community classes, and interpreting services. We'll go into details on a couple of these services as we go through. In 2019, we affiliated with People Inc. Really, the goal of this was to expand more services throughout New York, and we are now into a little bit of the Rochester area. We have fully merged with People Inc. and became a program as of December 2022. Our mission really is to really provide support, asset, communication, interests, all that, and empowerment for the deaf, hard of hearing, and people with hearing loss individuals by promoting all of these needs, awareness, opportunity for the greater community. This is a safe place, so if you have any question, concern, you're unsure about something, or you have any questions you have thought of, you are not sure how to ask, feel free to ask. I won't feel offended at all. I want you to feel comfortable about asking your question, and you have an answer after this presentation is over. A little bit about the deafness spectrum. There is no real term for this spectrum, so we call it deafness spectrum. There are different kinds of hearing losses. There are people with very mild to severe. I myself, if you look at this level right here, and where my mouth cursor is moving, with my hearing aid, I fall 60 to 80 dB. Yes, I am able to have a typical conversation. However, as a deaf person, I only can take a little bit here and there. I'm only getting 30% of what you're really saying because I'm reading your lip, getting a few words here and there, filling out the blank. It's like playing Mad Libs on paper, but day to day. Is it fun? Not necessarily. It gets tiring. That's why with important things that's happening with presentation, meeting, we request an ASL interpreter for those who utilize ASL. Now keep in mind, not every deaf person utilizes ASL. It's a very small portion of the community actually uses American Sign Language. Now, without my hearing aid, I would fall somewhere around here, which is 90 to 105. So I would not be able to hear what I would hear with my hearing aid. Now, I'm not saying hearing aid or cochlear implant solve things here, deafness or hearing loss. It is still going to be there. It's just there to amplify, help assist any kind of communication needs. Again, the hearing aid or a cochlear implant will not provide full need accommodation, and it's successful for everybody. But that's for me being born deaf. My brother is he's deaf. He does not talk like I talk, but he does sign. Now with us growing up from same parent, same family, same lifestyle, doing everything the same, going to the same school, his hearing loss is completely different. He was born deaf, yes, but his hearing loss is profound. He would fall right here where the jet aircraft and hand grenade. He did not hear anything at all. Now, if you were to put him right next to a jet aircraft, yes, he would feel the vibration. The vibration will go into his ear. But with all that, it did not really give him the hearing ability of hearing those things. So you can see how two of us from the same family is completely different in experience and being able to hear certain things. Now, there are people who are born hearing, and they have lost their hearing at a very young age with possibly spinal meningitis, ear infection, and so forth. So with that, they actually may learn sign already, or they're oral deaf, where they'll talk and not hear as well as a hearing person. And now there's late deafened, who, as a hearing person who was grown up hearing, did what they did, and then by the time they're 50, 45, 60 years old, you start losing your hearing. That is a progressive hearing loss. A lot of the deaf community would never really understand what it is like to be in your shoe if you are losing your hearing over time if we were born deaf, because we were never hearing to begin with. It's not an easy thing. It's not an easy journey to experience, but we're here to support you, provide you resources, information on how you can get through this. There are group session support people we can introduce you to and talk with how they have gone through and improve themselves and lifestyle and communication needs comparing to losing their hearing in the first place. The reason why the frustration is there is because they're not sure how to address certain issues with their friend, family, who all talks, and now they're having a hard time hearing them, but they don't know ASL with the deaf community. So the support group really does benefit the group who would lose their hearing over the years. So if you need those information, those kind of support, contact us. Assumption. The biggest thing that a lot of people would look at, especially like me, if I just don't sign and I never told people I'm deaf and I would just talk, eventually at a point I might say, oh, can you repeat that? I'm hard of hearing, I'm deaf. They'll look at me like, no way. You talk just fine, you can't be deaf. It's that assumption. There are deaf people that are really good lip readers. They would assume that they're not deaf at all. Not necessarily the case. Every person who has hearing loss is automatically deaf. Again, It depends on hearing loss, how severe it is. You could have a very small hearing loss. It's moderate. You can identify yourself as hard of hearing. There are some people who we understand when people identify themselves as hearing impaired. I remember I mentioned where we encourage people not to utilize that term. However, I'm not going to correct a person who identifies themselves as a hearing impaired person. That's a choice that they make. I would inform them that we use that hard of hearing with a person with hearing loss, but if they continue to use hearing impaired, it's their choice they make. There are a lot of issues with people thinking hearing aids and coconut plant cures deafness, where it actually doesn't, because the fact that if I take off my hearing aid, you take off your hearing aid, you are still deaf to begin with. So with that, it's the assumption at the end of the day that a lot of parents who get their child and they're born deaf, doctors will say, oh, coconut plant is the answer. Not necessarily always the case. It may work for some, it may not work for others. My brother, who's profoundly deaf, does not wear hearing aids or coconut plant, as he knows it will not benefit him. Now, there are some friends that I have who have coconut plants, and it works well for them. I have other friends who had coconut plants, and they said it's not successful. So it will vary for every single person. What we do here at Deaf Access Services, we try to encourage by exposing information on all aspects, getting resources. There are needs and accessibility for ASL. There are school information you can obtain with resources with coconut plant hearing aids, captioning needs, interpreting needs. So we provide you all of the resources needed, and then you as a family member, friend, support group, coworker can get those information and support your fellow peers. Now, what we ask for is when you meet a person who's deaf, hard of hearing, or anyone with any kind of hearing loss, don't sympathize them. I mean, most cases when I tell people I'm deaf, the first statement they would say is, oh, I am so sorry that you're deaf. It's like, well, thank you, but it's not your fault. It's nothing you can do about it. But we really can get through a normal lifestyle like anyone else do. The only thing is we can't hear as well as certain other people would. So we can work, we have good jobs, there are lawyers, there are doctors, yes, we can drive, all of this. So we function just as any normal person would do on a day-to-day lifestyle. Just really, it's giving each and every single one of those people with any kind of hearing loss the opportunity, the resources that they need, and when requested, the chance to be able to utilize those resources. They will show you what they are capable of doing, as well as yourself. Autism. This is a term that seemingly is new to a lot of hearing people that don't realize that they are somewhat discriminating, looking down on a person with any kind of hearing loss. It doesn't necessarily only apply to hearing people, but it also does apply to deaf people. What this word is not autism, but autism. It's actually a hearing person who feels like they are superior to a deaf person. And deaf people should be pitied, and they would not be able to do what a hearing person should do, as well as shunning and saying, you should not be signing, you should be trying to talk. Now, with all of it, it's not necessarily intentional. There are times where it does happen unintentionally. This is where we come in and we try to educate and support and explain by saying, hey, this is how you should approach certain things. Like if a doctor were to say, your child is deaf. Okay, well, they should get a coconut plant. They should not learn sign because they'll never have a job. So this is the best way to do it. medically speaking, that's how they're viewing it. It is autism in our view in the community base because there are a lot of deaf people that don't have implant or hearing aid and they still work and they use American Sign Language. So you can see the success there in utilizing a whole different perspective and shunning away the culture there. So with all of this, we try to encourage to be mindful and to be understanding and ask questions. So say, okay, so what do you do? What can you do? What have you been successful with? Does hearing aid work for you? If not, okay. Don't force it upon people. Don't assume certain things. A couple things that are actually great examples of autism is not taking the time to communicate. This kind of example, it's really like the fact of if you were to invite me to a group, a party, or any kind of gathering with that, and I'm trying to keep up with the conversation, I would ask you, what is this person saying? What happened? What was being said? And this could be applied for anyone with any kind of hearing loss. It's hard to keep up with a multi-person conversation in the same room. And the person who invited me is telling me, I'll explain it to you in 5 minutes. Well, everyone had a good laugh at that moment, and now I want to know what was said. 5 minutes goes by, I ask the person again, they say, hold on a second, well, I'll get back to you on that. After that, 5 more minutes goes by, really, it's been 10 minutes already, and I should move on. That isn't a perfect example of autism, but at the same time, it may be unintentional. So this person didn't want to miss their other conversation, but at the same time, you're leaving me out. You invited me, but you're leaving the person out of being able to socialize. Assuming that people can't do things. Just because the fact that they can't hear or have a hard time hearing certain things is actually the fact of discriminating. It's just thinking that, you can't work, you won't be able to drive, there's certain things like you can't be doctor, you can't be lawyer. Yes, there are like maybe very, very few things that a deaf person would not be able to do due to a hearing loss, like serve in the military in war combat, but we still can serve in the military by being in office work. So there are different places where you can figure things out, especially with technology nowadays. There are a lot of things out there that can be used, requested, and applied. It's just being able to get them when asked. Thinking deafness is a tragedy. That's what I was trying to say. Don't sympathize us. Don't say, oh my God, it must be the worst thing in the world. Don't ever say I'd rather be blind than being deaf, or we don't say we'd rather be deaf than being blind. It's none of that. Everyone's journey is different. Those kind of things, again, it is unintentional in most cases, but when we try to explain it, we try to say, don't take this the wrong way. We're trying to help you so you know not to say certain things the next time. Employment discrimination is the biggest issue that a lot of us face because how do we explain to the workforce that I need specific accommodation and I will not be denied those accommodations or I lose an opportunity to have a job? Keeping in mind, a lot of the deaf community are on Social Security, SSI, Social Security income. With all that, we'll probably get what, $800, $900 a month now. With that, 75% of the deaf community members are on SSI. Should mainly in my knowledge is because when they try to apply for a job and when they have an interview ready, they're asking, can I have an interpreter? Or I need captioning. A lot of the time, the response from the employer is like, oh, we found someone to fill the position. Thank you very much. You should ask us for an interview. As soon as I ask for accommodation, the position is immediately filled. or we'll actually go into an interview and not ask for accommodation, and we try to figure things out. But when we try to figure things out ourselves, sometimes it doesn't work in our favor, and we respond incorrectly, with certain things not being aligned with their question, and they may see it like this person not suited for the job. So it's a double-edged sword, catch-22 if you want to call it, for us at the end of the day, and we struggle trying to find jobs, especially because a lot of people don't want to take the time to communicate with us, even though we are able to communicate with anybody. It is really, at the end of the day, building the bridge together. You build one side, we'll build the other side. Let's meet halfway. We'll make the world a better place to live as far as communication. ASL is utilized in our community a lot. Keeping in mind, American Sign Language is utilized here in America. Sign languages do differ throughout the world. For every country you can think of, there are chances that there are a sign language utilized for that country by themselves. Now, if I was going to go to Ireland, England, all that, they have their own sign. Yes, they'll be able to communicate structurally, but at the same time, they have their own country sign, and American Sign Language is here in America. ASL had originated from France. So France Sign Language had their own foundation background, and it was actually carried here to America. Here in America, we have two deaf colleges, one in Washington, D.C., and that's Gallaudet University, and we have about 4,000 deaf students there. And one in Rochester, our neighboring city, an hour away from here. They are RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology. They have a college program through RIT, which is NTID, National Technical Institute and for the Deaf, NTID. They have about 2,500 deaf students that goes there. Now, every single one of these students do differ in communication needs. So some do sign, some may not sign. Now, in the community, we have culture. Culture, we do have our belief in music, art, everything that you can think of, we have it in our community. And yes, music is one big thing where a lot of the deaf people enjoy music. And with music, it's more of a bass, it's vibration. So if a lot of you like driven cars, drive cars, or wherever you go, and you pull up to a stoplight, and I'm sure a lot of you have experienced a person next to you beating and like blasting their car so loud that it bothers you. If that is the case, I apologize. You would have hated me in high school because I had that experience myself. I was one of those people. The only reason why I did that was because my brother, who is deaf, didn't understand music. So the only way I could really express it, explain it, and connect it was to actually have him feel the vibration of the music through the beats in the car. So I had a subwoofer in the back trunk and a subwoofer underneath the seat, and then connected with the music so he can feel the bass. With him feeling the bass, he could feel the vibration and all that, how music is a big part of a lot of people's lives. Now, all that being said, I don't have those music subwoofers in my car anymore. However, it did make a difference in showing, explaining the deaf person the importance of music. Now, with our community, with arts, culture, history, everything with that, a lot of people don't realize with the deaf people, the deaf community, person with hearing loss, hard of hearing, have made big impact in our lives today. For instance, every single one of you uses and turn on a light switch every single day and the light bulb goes on. Thomas Edison, who created a light bulb, is hard of hearing himself. He had some hearing loss. For those who have yourself, family members, daughters, nieces who have joined Girl Scouts, with Girl Scouts, it was founded and originated by a deaf person. A deaf woman actually originated Girl Scout way back in the day. Those are histories and facts that are normally left out. For those who watch football and enjoy football during college and professionally, when they get to their next play, everyone does the huddle. With the huddle itself, that action, that play concept was actually started and came up with the idea from Gallaudet University, a group of deaf football players to be able to communicate by sign language, but didn't want the outside fans or teams to see the gesture language because you're showing route changes and all that, so they did the huddle. So all of this, the little things in life that goes through that we use every day, there are the people that had come up with some of those things and made big impact. Now, when we are told that we are not able to do certain things, not being able to take the time to communicate with us, how can we be there to help you be able to succeed and make improvement in lives too when there were things had been done in the past? All that leads to oppression, which is what we're trying to push and break through. Yes, it is a big improvement from back in the 1970s, 80s with language access. My parents would actually, at being deaf, when they went to a public school, they did not have an interpreter, nor was there a law saying that every deaf person who has any accommodation or people with disability has accommodation until the 90s, which 1990 with the ADA being passed, people with disability can have and have the right to having equal access and having effective communication access and any accommodation needed. Those change for a lot of us, so my experience will differ than my parents' experience back in their time. With interpreters and captioning access, it does make a big, big difference. With captioning, I could actually benefit with captioning even with a hearing person. We encourage all people to actually have captioning on their TV as much as possible, especially at bigger facility venues, bars, restaurants, because you don't know who around you have some kind of hearing loss. So even yourself, if anybody who is losing their hearing, even if you had a cold, sometimes your ear kind of like get plugged up a little bit because of the fluid, so you don't hear as well. Keeping in mind, captioning on TV will benefit yourself as well as your significant other, colleague, friend, peers, all around you. And it will make them feel like they have equal access. Not everyone is equally as assertive to make sure they have the right provided as certain others. So if you can be there to support them, help them, don't do things for them, but be there to support them. With captioning, we want to also encourage the understanding of audio captioning and actual person typing out captioning, live captioning. Audio captioning is detected by what's being said right now. Right now, we have audio captioning, and if anyone was to turn it on, you may see it's not 100% accurate because of the accent and syllable I have to say. With those certain things, it can mean an entire different content information that is being said if there's a different word that was put in. Accent does play a lot of factor, especially if you're from another country and you're coming here and the computer is trying to identify what specific word is being said. This is why we encourage actual live captioner, which is CART services, communication at real-time translation. It'll be a person that actually sits in and listens to what's actually being said and typing everything out. This person can be in the meeting, remotely done, and then being able to type out all of the proper words that is being heard. So that way you have equal access to getting the right information. It's very beneficial in a lot of presentation, workshop, training, school, and especially those who don't know American Sign Language. So if you are a person with any kind of hearing loss and you are struggling to watch a presentation and understand what is being said, you have that right to have captioning. Keeping in mind, all of these accommodations, where I will also explain a little bit more on, it's actually they're free of charge for you as a person who needs the accommodation. The provider who is hosting the event needs to cover those expenses. It's on them. Yet there are a lot of loopholes that comes into play regarding to the ADA law. But if you were going to your doctor's appointment and you had a hard time talking to, understanding your doctor, then you request captioning heart services to your doctor by law has to provide you the accommodation. So, all of the captioning and interpreter are bound to confidentiality, so they cannot be sharing information outside. Really, it's like patient-client, client-doctor privilege. It's confidential between you and your doctor. It's the exact same thing happened to captioner and interpreter with any kind of patient or client that needs those accommodations. I already talked a little bit about our deaf culture, identity, social belief, tradition, histories, and values. But you may see there are some deaf people who take pride in it and they write, I am deaf with a big case D, because that's who they are as a person. They take pride in that as their identity. And then you may see some with lowercase d, that's usually more of the medical condition. Their deafness is, they have mild hearing loss, their deafness is this, okay? So all that may be utilized. I take pride in who I am as a deaf person and where I come from with a big deaf family, so I utilize a big D. With ASL, I want to be clear that you cannot write ASL. It's not a written language, it is a visual language. So basically when I sign, it will be different than how I write it out. So I like to use this for an example is I am going to the store. So I'll write out I am going to the store. Now if I sign it, it will be store I go, or I go store. That 3 words that I just signed, it means the exact same thing as I am going to the store. So with that being said, you may meet a person who write I go store, because they're writing at how they think they're signing it. So it doesn't necessarily mean their English is broken. They have capability, they have language. It's how they're thinking of how they're signing it, which actually really benefits when they have an interpreter, because the interpreter there, when they don't talk, they can sign I go to store. The interpreter can actually take that in and say, I am going to the store. And then back. The interpreter is not just there for the deaf person. The interpreter is there for the hearing person as well. Take a minute to think about this. I can read your lips. I'm not saying every deaf person can read lips as well as everyone else, but if I can, I'll probably take 10 to 15% of what you're saying by reading lips. With that being said, if I would just sign to you and you knew no sign language, you have 0. Who needs the interpreter at the end of a day? It's really you. However, what we tell people is we need the interpreter because it will make it easier to have a conversation, the discussion, meeting for the both of us. So that way it saves us time We have the interpreter there to say what they need to say, what I'm signing, and vice versa, what you're saying in ASL back to us. It speeds up the whole process a lot faster, even in captioning, with typing it out, for those who don't utilize it ASL. A lot of people thinking pen and paper is a good way to go. Yeah, it's fine for like if I'm going to the store and I need to find something in aisle 5. Okay, but if I'm going to talk with my lawyer and I was being arrested for something, and now my lawyer is going to write everything back and forth, that 30-minute discussion becomes 4 hours because we're trying to write everything down. Again, a lot of miscommunication can happen with the fact of English not being our primary language where ASL is. So it's a lot of cultural identity purpose where we're trying to explain the importance of the accommodation, needs, and access. There's a few things I do like to share about myself. Like one of the times I've gone to a McDonald's, it was 2 in the morning. And with it being at 2 o'clock in the morning, my friend and I, we wanted to order like a cheeseburger or something. There was a sweet woman that came up to us. She asked, this was on Union Road in Cheektowaga. This woman asked, how did we get there? And I looked at her. In a way, in our mind, we get the question asked a lot. Do we drive? Can you drive? How are you able to drive if you can't hear? We said we can drive. What we go through on a daily basis is really no different than what you go through. If you think about it, you're on your cell phone, you're listening to radio. Do you hear everything that's going around you just like a deaf person? No. So we utilize our eyes. So we're actually always aware of what we're trying to do when we're driving. In perspective, perhaps deaf people are better drivers than hearing people. And I don't know if any one of you are laughing right now. I'm joking. There's no statistical fact. But it's just a thought to think about. We utilize our eye all the time. We are visual human beings. We utilize our eyes for everything. We'll analyze facial expression, body language, because we can't hear tone of voice. So you being mad, you being frustrated, we'll see your eyebrows move. You being happy or excited, your eyebrows goes up. While as a hearing person, they'll hear the voice tone going up, going down. So that's why face is very important. COVID impacted the deaf and hard of hearing community big time, and it did impact a lot of people with hearing loss as well because math muffled a lot of things. It was a frustrating time for a lot of us. Yes, everybody. But for the deaf and hard of hearing community, people with hearing loss did go through isolation. It took them longer to do certain things because of communication access was limited. Nobody wanted to get close to us to do the right something on pen and paper to get something at the store. Nobody wanted to touch each other's phone, so forth. And math, nobody could read lips. So that was a lot of frustration happening up until now, where we are at a point where we can go through our daily life, being safe still, but at the same time, having a little bit more of that effective communication access better than the last few years. What I like to do is I like to look at COVID as a beneficial wake-up call for a lot of things, but it unfortunately took COVID for this to happen, which is all of the accommodation that is needed for a lot of us. Like clear masks. Clear masks are great. Yet there are still needs for improvements on clear masks, but at the same time, it still can be beneficial for doctors and dentists to utilize in all purposes, especially in medical emergency for everybody, not just deaf and hard of hearing person. Interpreting assets on TV, because captioning is not 100% effective. With captioning not being 100% effective, the interpreter there is there to actually sign in ASL for those who rely on ASL as their primary language. One of the experience that we've had was there was curfew that happened in the city of Buffalo a few years back during COVID, where they that everyone needs to stay at home, need to be in the house by 8:39. The captioning was not on, and the interpreter was not there. With that, language access was deprived. So now, if a deaf person or a person with hearing loss who relies on one of these accessibility accommodations went out there and got arrested, is that fair? So there's a lot of information that does require importance of having captioning being provided, interpreter being provided, equal access for everybody. Really, it's really working together. That is the biggest thing. Let's build that bridge, build that gap. You and I, we can work together and be able to like make this world a better place. It's providing communication access, taking the extra step by saying, how can we support you? I already talked a little bit about the ADA. I don't want to dive into it too much, but yes, you have your right to having accommodation when you ask for it. So if you need anything, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. We'll clarify certain things if you need those accommodations and when and where you can ask for those accommodations. Now the differences with interpreter, VRI, cart services, and assistive listening devices. Providing an interpreter, we had Karen here in the office today. She is a hearing interpreter, so she would interpret ASL to English, English back to ASL. That is mostly the most common interpreting situation that are out there for a lot of deaf hard of hearing clients. They usually work up to 90 minutes alone, but if it's more than 90 minutes, we encourage 2 interpreters, because think about this, do this for 20 minutes, let me know how your shoulders feel. That kind of concept, it is a bit tiring. We are there to support, advocate, interpreters that will encourage certain things in certain situations, such as going to a show and in the wrong location, interpreters will advocate themselves to be able to have the deaf person see them clearly. Now, a deaf interpreter, there are certified deaf interpreters and deaf interpreters. They do ASL to gesture, gesture back to ASL. And this requires the hearing interpreter to be in the picture. How does that work? We have a person who talks, the doctor who talks to the hearing interpreter. The hearing interpreter will sign it to the deaf interpreter. The deaf interpreter will gesture it to a person who's a deaf new American, deaf refugee who don't know ASL. So we will be able to bring it down a notch who has minimal language skills or different country signs will gesture it as much as possible to be able to provide the best communication access tool for them. With all of that, people do ask, why can't we find an interpreter who signs in Arabic or Farsi? Or it's very hard to find a lot of interpreters to begin with. We have about 5,000 deaf people in Western New York. We have about, at most, 100 interpreters. An interpreter can't work every day. So which makes it hard to have enough interpreters for everyone, which is where when you know you need an interpreter or any kind of accommodation, we encourage you to request it or put in the request more than 2 weeks in advance so we can ensure we book and reserve the interpreter or accommodation that you need for the client, the person, or yourself. Video remote interpreting is actually something on like FaceTime. It's on a computer or a laptop where I would sign, the interpreter will see me two-dimensional. It's great for emergency situation. However, it has its downside. It's not always great if there's no Wi-Fi connection. If Wi-Fi is weak, it's not great in large settings. The downside, we are seeing that a lot of medical facilities are utilizing VRI because it's easier for them, but it's not easy for us as a patient. we put in the request for an in-person interpreter. Please ask for an in-person interpreter. Don't just ignore our request. Or if you are asking for a specific accommodation, you would hope for them to get that specific accommodation because that suits you. Now, my preferred method of communication may differ from your preferred method of communication. So keep in mind, not every single one of us will have the same preferred communication method. Captioning and communication at real-time translation are services. That is actually, I explained, is typing, a person typing everything out. At the end of meeting, presentation, session, workshop, there's a transcript that gets printed out. You can have that transcript and the review back. It's very beneficial for school, especially when a person has some kind of hearing loss and they're trying to like pay attention in class, but they can't take notes. This will help them. All of our interpreters are qualified or certified. We ensure that we put the interpreter in the right place at the right time for situation. Keep in mind, if you learn ASL, that does not mean you are qualified to be an interpreter. It is like saying you took CPR and you're certified for CPR, but does that qualify you for heart surgery? Not necessarily at all. So this is why we explain that interpreters go through a strict program, classes, and get their certification, they get their degree in interpreting, and they become interpreters. And not every interpreter is suitable for every situation. There's law and courts interpreting, there's medical interpreting, there's doctors interpreting, there's school, so there's various kinds of fields. And we make sure that every single one fits for specific client and patient needs. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I will be more than happy to assist you, give you more information as much as possible. And I am open to questions.
Okay, Dave, thanks so much. That was very good. We'll wait a few minutes to see if we get some questions in the chat.
Let me see the chat. I have a question from Jane. Do deaf people always have deaf children? Not necessarily the case. It's really genetic. My genetic family is very, I have more of a dominant gene of deaf community members in my family. So with my wife being deaf, her parents are deaf as well. I'm deaf, my parents are deaf. So the gene that we have, the chances are very likely that our children will be deaf. Now, I'm not saying it's 100% guaranteed. I have friends who have kids, they're hearing, and their parents are deaf. So, so what we call them are CODAs, which is child of deaf adults, children of deaf adults, CODA, kids of deaf adults, so all of that. So not every deaf parent will have deaf children. It really would depend. I hope that answered your question, James.
Okay, and I think I'm going to unmute the caller. We have a call in to see if they have a question. So hang on one second.
Okay.
To the person who has called in, do you have a question for Dave?
Not anymore. He answered my question. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, let me mute you.
Really, our office is located on 2495 Main Street. We're on the 4th floor of the Tri-Main building, and our offices are open from 9 to 4. So really, if you have any question, concern, if you're really in need of support, accommodation for yourself, family member, friend, colleagues, feel free to have them come see us. We're there to discuss, be there for anyone, and make sure your life had that accommodation and you are able to go through your daily life and fairly and equitable as everyone else. How do children, Jane, that how do children learn to speak if the parents are totally deaf? Really, a lot of the children will well, if their parents are deaf and they're hearing, the child will go to a public school. They'll go to a hearing school. They'll hear, they'll pick it up as they go. They learn sign if their parents sign at home. So really, it's like how does a hearing parent would have deaf kids and how deaf kids will learn sign. It's really taking ASL class. If they go to the like a deaf school, they pick up ASL themselves. It's really the same kind of concept. It's the experience that they actually navigate. But yes, hearing kids will pick up as they go with TV, hearing at schools, and so forth.
Okay. Dave, I did record this session. If you are okay with it, we'll put it up on our website for others to view.
Not a problem.
Okay. Okay, and if you want to stay on for a few minutes after everyone logs off, I will talk with you just about a couple things for next semester.
Sounds good.
Okay, everyone, thanks for joining us today. Please take note of our upcoming virtual classes as well as our in-person classes. And thanks again for joining us. Take care.